It's almost impossible to preface a review of a video game movie without pointing out the disastrous history of film adaptations of popular video games. It just hasn't gone well, and for whatever reason, despite failure after failure, nobody seems to be able to step up and get it right. But maybe, just maybe, Assassin's Creed will be different. Except, no, it wasn't. Let me just preface this by saying that I was horribly unimpressed by the trailers for this movie, which led to me going into it with very low expectations. And usually that's a recipe for me liking a movie a lot more than I otherwise would have. But not even with that working for it, Assassin's Creed was just totally underwhelming. Maybe the biggest problem with this movie is that there's a handful of nice little things that are introduced throughout the whole thing that are kind of like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here, let's see where they go with this. Only they pretty much never go anywhere with them. And that's maybe my biggest takeaway from this movie, is that it introduced a lot of things, but most of them only briefly. It did a poor job of establishing just about everything involved, and for whatever little was established, it wasn't very well developed after that. The movie also had almost no character to it. Everybody is pretty much exactly what you see of them on the surface from the beginning, and they don't really develop anybody at all. Mainly in the sense that we don't really see them grow as characters. Some of them might eventually start doing different things, but we didn't necessarily see that growth happen, it just sort of happened. And that's not to say that some of them don't eventually do a thing or two that's actually kind of cool. But on the whole, it was yet another thing that left a ton to be desired. Assassin's Creed also very obviously had its own checklist of things that it needed to squeeze in there from the video games, and they knock out most of that in just one scene. And while seeing that was neat and all, it just didn't matter much to see because the characters involved hadn't yet given you a reason to really care about them or their motives. And I also have to say that if you're somebody not familiar with the games going to see this movie, I imagine you're going to be completely lost, because it felt like they relied a decent bit on the audience being familiar with the source material. And I think that's another big shortcoming, because if you're going to rely on us, the audience, already knowing certain things about the source material, that's an opportunity to really expand the story and characters out a bit more. But they just didn't. Now, there are a few cool bits of action in the movie, but almost all of them you already saw in the trailer. And again, while that action was decent at times, there was nothing to make us really care about it. We're seeing things happen, but the reason that they're happening just wasn't ever made very clear to the audience. This movie's also a bit odd visually as well. It was never anything too annoying, but almost the whole thing had very bland colors going on for it. Obviously, some of that is them trying to capture an era with the Spanish Inquisition, but pretty much every scene is either overwhelmingly yellow and brown or overwhelmingly white and blue, with almost no in-between. And I swear, like 5 or 6 times in this movie, it's like it sort of lost its way, and during editing they didn't know how to transition a scene, so they just go to a big shot of an eagle flying over a city. Really weird thing they did with the eagle imagery in this. Anyway, in the end, Assassin's Creed did make an honest effort at a video game adaptation that tries to stay as close to its source material as it could. And I think that's possibly one of its biggest downfalls as a movie. You just can't take a 25-hour video game story and cram it into 2 hours like they did. And along the way, when just about everything in there is poorly established and poorly developed, you've got the makings for yet another video game franchise where filmmakers dropped the ball on bringing it to the big screen. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on Assassin's Creed, and I'd be happy to hear your thoughts if you've also seen Assassin's Creed. Also, be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it, but above all else, everybody, thanks so much for watching.